someone's a true level of their intelligence, there are several tests. But the IQ test is the one that's used because we live in a capitalist country and is designed to push industry. So the IQ test is kind of the standard because it's not really general knowledge based. It's mathematical concepts designed for it. It's designed for pattern recognition, puzzle solving, constructs. So it's interesting when you described how we kind of put things in a box, or how we try to compartmentalize the way we see things. We categorize it. You understand what I'm saying? Like you mentioned the conversation with music, it was like we were having a conversation trying to solve the puzzle of what category this is, or what box this goes in, or you understand what I'm saying? So yeah, I just wanted to add to what you were saying.
Well, and that's like also, for example, like why I find that like, that's also, for example, why I find like in the LGBT community, LGBT, whatever long acronyms they have now, that like often the L and the G have like disdain for the B, because like oftentimes like gays and lesbians have disdain for bisexuals, because to them they're like, well, you got to pick one or the other, you know, like it just does not compute in their mind that somebody could be, you know, interested in multiple genders. And then the same thing even applies now to gender, because we're so used to like I find myself constantly having to catch myself, because, you know, when we were growing up, like it was like, you're a boy, you're a girl, and we're used to just having those two boxes. And now there's a lot more than two boxes, and like people who are of a different generation than today's kids, our brains are just trying to adapt to all the addition of new boxes.
It's interesting because and I'm using I specifically, recently started telling people that I, using it specifically, would like my pronoun to be we, and nobody's been respecting that at all. They just laugh at me. I'm just throwing that out there.
Is that something that you're genuinely interested in, or is that meant as more of a statement?
It was meant as a statement, and then I decided I didn't want to make it a statement and go all the way in with it like I can, because that's just how I am, because I don't want to be disrespectful of people's plights. So I quickly was like, you know what, I feel like I definitely don't want to, it wasn't my intention, but if it came off that way, I don't want to, like, it's not that big of a deal to me if you say I. So I never want to be the person that is like disrespecting or putting down someone else's plight. You know, it was just an interesting topic of conversation where I just recently learned that people refer to themselves as they, and I had just learned it, and I was like intrigued by that. So I'm like, you know, how about if I want to be called we? And I didn't even mean it to be funny, like on Dave Chappelle. I was serious. And then, you know, I was talking to my friend about it, and she was like, well, that's the case. She was the only person. But everyone else, I'm like, I want to be we. And that was an experiment within the groups of people that I know. And that was like, you know, my wife, my friends, and they're all just kind of looked at me like, and I'm like, well, it made me think, if I seriously want to be called by we, where are your heads at that you don't have an open mind and you're not willing to accept it? And I was going to push the issue, but then I check myself. Like, I sit down and I'm introspective, and I really thought about it, and I said, I could push this issue to prove a point to these people that are around me, that are close to me, that, you know, they need to have more open minds. But if in the process, if that's the only reason why I'm doing it, then am I like using the plight of someone else that's a very real plight that really matters just to prove a point? And to me, it's not worth it. It's bad character. So I kind of just was like, nah. You know what I mean?
I thought you were kind of just poking the bear when you did that.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't, but I didn't. I was, you know, I do these experiments. They're social experiments, but then I had all good intent. But just because you have good intent doesn't mean that the end result isn't something negative.
Well,
You know what I mean?
let me ask, what was the purpose of a different pronoun for you?
Well, I told you why. At the time, I was serious. I'm like, this is something, and I'm thinking like, this is cool. It's cool. I don't have to be he or she. I can just be we. You know what I mean? Or they. And the reason why is because then I don't have to be put into this gender box, because I've really been this part of the year exploring the idea of gender being a social concept, and I didn't know whether I agreed or not. So there are certain people, select people, that I'm comfortable having the conversation with, and I've just been having extensive conversations with them about it. My thoughts for or against the whole idea, and I come to the conclusion that, okay, this is acceptable to me. Whether it needs to be acceptable to me or not, we're humans, and we all have our own understanding and ways of digesting things. And it doesn't need to be, but it was something that I explored, and I agreed, well, this is acceptable, and it allowed me to come to another conclusion that, well, if I choose not to, it doesn't have anything to do with who I'm sexually active with or what have you, and everything to do with what I choose. And ultimately I thought, well, it's my choice to identify a certain way or by a certain pronoun if I choose to. I can just make this choice, and really nobody can hold it against me. Nobody can say, well, you don't have a, like, no one can, because the very premise of choosing a pronoun says as much. Just the very basic premise of it. So I'm like, well, I can just make the choice, and I'd rather be referred to as we than he or she or they or I. This is me. So I legitimately, I talked to a friend of mine about it, and she was like, well, Ish, she's the only one, Carrie. She's the only one. She was like, Ish, if that's really where you're at, and she was like, and I know you, then I'll respect that. You know what I mean? And so then when I told other people very close to me, it wasn't like I just went to the world. I was like, you're gonna call me we. They kind of laughed it off, and that's when I realized, like, okay, well, now I'm experimenting, and I don't want to, because there are people who are not experimenting. And when I say I was experimenting, it became this, let me explore this. These people who are close to me, who are open-minded, may not be as open-minded as they say they are, because they're not going for this. And I can push the issue and tell them I'm serious, and then we'd have an issue. And I'm like, and there are people who are not experimenting. They're serious. Again, that's, I'm kind of restating what I already said. And being who I am, I don't want what is now becoming an experiment, even though, to be honest with you, Mike, absolutely, I would love to be referred to as we. But not so much that I'm about to just cross over into territory inadvertently that could be hurtful to people.
Well, no, that's that's what I was wondering. I mean, that was more of I guess that was more of what I was wondering. I think the first time I didn't really I got the experimentation, but I just didn't really get the idea of why.
Well, it's a bit of both, and it doesn't have to be a why. That's what I'm getting at, right? Like, yeah. That's what I'm also getting at. But I know me, and I know that I'm methodical and I'm experimental, and sometimes to a fault. So that's when I just was like, you know what? If there's any conflict, yes, I genuinely would like to be referred to as we, but in as much as I'd also like to experiment and explore the human condition behind this whole process, well, that to me creates a dichotomy that I think could be hurtful, and I'll just forget it. But yeah, to be honest with you, the very premise of the choice merits that I don't have to say why.
Did you ever?
Nor does anyone. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Did you ever think that your grammatical choice made it a little bit difficult too?
Well, I just like we.
Yeah,
I feel like there's several issues based upon. Yeah. So my thought process was, I'm only really ish when I'm by myself.
Okay.
Right? So I have several different personalities, tailor-made for every and they're unique, tailor-made for every person that I interact with.
hypothetically, that makes everybody we, though, because, like, everybody code switches.
Right. Everybody has unique personalities suited to the people. I just told a friend of mine the other day, I just said this to her. She's been married for 9 years and they just had a kid, and I congratulated her, and I said to her, congratulations on her name is, I'm not going to say her name. I'm like,
Her name is
congratulations.
blank.
Yeah, I said, congratulations on meeting your husband. And she's like, we've been together for 9 years. I'm like, yeah, but this is the first time that you've met him as a father. It's the first time, like, he's never known you as a mother before. He's never met this version of you till now.
Well, it's like, for example, like, I could speculate on what Misha would be like as a father, but we don't have kids, so.
But it'll be nuanced.
I don't really
right?
know.
Whenever your child isn't around, then both of your personalities will change to suit an environment or a situation conducive to just the two of you. When your child is brought into that situation, then you operate in a nuanced and tailor-made personality designed to operate with that child.
I think we might have missed something, and I'm not trying to be like a stickler, because I want to explore what you're talking about, and the pronoun we is interesting, but it's still like grammatically, I guess, like incorrect, for lack of a better word, right?
It can't be incorrect. It's a choice. It's like saying when someone chooses to say they.
I said for lack of a better word, because.
Well, I think what you mean is it just doesn't make sense. Like, if you look at one person, like, you're not going to say we or.
No, it's not about the number of people. It's about we versus they. It's like
it's not about we versus they. That's just what you choose to make it.
Well, like I said, I'm just speaking from a grammatical standpoint. Like when you're trying to like distinguish between who you're talking about, right? Like if I'm talking about someone else, then I'm talking about like he, she, they, or them. If I'm including myself, then I'm talking about like us, we, I, or me.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're getting at is that, like, say for example, like Ish, you said you wanted to be referred to as we and
us,
and you go to the store, and then I say, well, Ish said we were going to go to the store. People would think that I meant, well, Ish said that all of us were going to go to the store, when you really meant that just you were going to go to the store.
Or you and Ish, right?
But it's the same as if a they, who I know a they, says they are going to the store, referring to themselves.
What's your reason for preferring we, us to they, them?
Well, I didn't even consider they, them. I just chose personally, just for me, we, because the way I evaluate myself is if it's the only time I felt comfortable in that scenario referring to myself as I is if I was alone. Because then that's just I. The moment I enter a group or a situation with other people, I become we, personality-wise. That's just my logic and my personal thought process. That's the reason.
I'm not telling you you're wrong at all. I'm just saying,
hold on, Mike. I just wanted to say to you, Erica, I never made a comparison with they and said, instead of they, I'm choosing we. They never occurred to me. I understood it. I had been introduced to it, but the concept of they versus me choosing we, it was never a we versus they.
I definitely conceptually support your theory and belief that gender is a construct. So for you to choose not to align yourself with a gender and then say we, us, because you don't want to align yourself with a gender, that makes perfect sense to me. But as Mike's saying, grammatically, that I think
we can make the same argument for they, because they also speaks to a group as well.
No, I didn't say her. Please.
Well, I'm
let me
talking
read.
to Erica. I'm responding to Erica.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm responding to you and to Emily.
Hmm.
So if I can restate my case again, for you to refer to yourself as we makes grammatical sense. I don't care like how many of you there are. That's not what I'm talking about. And I say this to Emily, who has talked about like one person versus many. But if someone else besides you yourself-ish refers to you, at that point, using we is going to be confusing. And not in the same way that they is, because they refers to someone besides yourself. Right? So
Or
if you're
someone's beside yourself as well, but yes.
Yeah, a billion to one. I don't care how many. That's not my point at all. So if someone is like, where did Ish go? And I say, we went to the store, then
People are
that
gonna
sounds
think you
like
went with him.
that sounds like I went with you. Now,
Or you could say Ish went to the store.
Yeah, but that's not a pronoun though. That's fine. That's not what we're talking about.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's not. We're not talking rocket science. We don't have to make it into physics.
You just think
your whole point. Your whole
happen.
point was you were using we as a pronoun. So okay, so in that case, fine. So it's not a universal pronoun. It's a personal pronoun.
Yeah, that's what these are, personal pronouns.
No, well, no, they is not. When I refer to Erica and I say they're going to the store, that's not personal. That's referring to someone else.
Yeah, but Mike, see, this is what you're doing right now, right? You said that you're trying to understand, but it's actually like having those conversations where people ask you about cultural things to argue against it.
I'm not arguing.
No.
I'm making a distinction.
Yeah, but that's okay, right? Like you can make the distinction and I can still make the choice.
Yes, so
I'm not making the choice.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So when I came to the conclusion that you're talking about a personal pronoun, that's not like an attack or a criticism.
No, not at all. What I'm saying is it's my understanding that these are all personal pronouns. I never even heard the term universal pronoun. And when they was introduced to me, it was introduced as a personal pronoun.
Well,
it was said to me. I didn't even know there were.
But a lot of people, when they say I'm going to go by they mean that's what they want other people to refer to them as.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
And I want other people to refer to me as we. But if they have to refer, when they're referring to me, we or us. However, now I don't anymore. It's not that big of a deal. We're just talking. However, it doesn't have to be so complicated. I still have a name.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you is, in what sentence would someone else refer to you as we that makes sense?
Well, I mean, I've had my friend used to say, "How are we?"
Okay.
As opposed
and I'd
to
say
how
we are.
You?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's what I was getting at. Okay. That's what I was getting at.
Curie would say, "How are we?" And I'd say, "We are."
Okay,
just like when people ask Ish, when they say to me, "Ish, how are you?" I usually say, "I am."
Okay.
That's normally my response. You know what I mean?
That makes sense to me. That's what I couldn't understand. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. I love these dialogue. Again, it's not so serious because it's not something that I'm choosing to do. I was grammatically confused by they because they certainly can be used in grammatically the way that you said, but also it refers in as much as we does to a billion to one.
Well, but and also too, like, you know, I'm not going to walk up to you on the street and say, "How are they?" Like, you're going to assume that I'm talking about your kids or your dogs or something, not about you.
Right. Yeah. They is not used in that sense.
Right. But yeah, no, I'm glad we got to explore that. And again, the only reason why I think that the deep dive might have been more than necessary is only because I don't want people to get confused with the idea that that is something that it's a choice that I'm still making, because I'm just not. And because I think it's disrespectful to other people's plights. Even though, Mike, I will tell you again, and I'm duplicitous in it, because certainly there's an experimental side of me that I can't deny, because that's just who I am. But absolutely, I would love to be referred to as we.
I mean, to be honest, I kind of it kind of feels good or warm to ask someone how are we doing, especially if you're not doing it in like a condescending like boss to like employee kind of way.
And that,
So that is,
I'm gonna
that
need
is,
you to
yeah,
I'm gonna need you to come in on Saturday. Yeah.
yeah. But no, that is pretty interesting. Um, yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that.
and there's, you know, I also am different. So because of that, you know, I would go with a different pronoun anyway. But
I mean,
again,
that actually makes me wonder if folks who use they would actually consider using we in that context. Again, I come at it from more of a grammatical sense. But what do you think about that, Erica? Does that make sense, or is
I
they
think
use?
I think it took a long time to establish the use of they them as a normal kind of part of our language, that now I think the masses are finally comfortable with they them, that I don't think that we're going to change that anytime soon.
I think you give the masses too much credit.
That's not what I mean though, because we're exploring another interaction when you're speaking to someone directly, right? We just admitted that in no sentence would I refer to you as they if I'm speaking to you directly, but if I come up to you and say how are we doing, that totally makes sense. So
That's
the
totally
question.
acceptable, because you're not assigning gender with that, but you wouldn't assign gender. You wouldn't say how are she doing, how, you know what I mean, how are he.
Yeah, so that's
what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
Like,
no, my question is, isn't we actually more appropriate than you in a situation where they is already being used?
I don't think so, because you and we are both genderless.
Okay.
So the only reason to use they them is that it's the best way to not use a gendered pronoun. That in our language, it's the best thing we've got at the moment to say I'm not gendered.
to
Right.
say I'm neither male nor female.
Exactly. And we or you, that those two words also aren't gendered. There's no gender assigned to that. So
Right.
Well, I
I
think
think
the dichotomy between we and you is, again, like, you know, that's not gender related. Like, somebody saying I want to be referred to as we, they're not saying that because, like, they're ambiguous with their gender. They're saying that because they feel like their code switching leads them to be multiple people, you know what I mean? Like, it's not gender related. So, like, I think that, like, a transgendered person would be perfectly fine with you walking up to them and saying, how are you doing?
of course, yeah. It's if they said, you don't ever gender that sentence anyway. It's more so if you were to say, hey dude, what's up, how's it going, and that, you know, now we're putting a gender on it, and that can be problematic.
It's
Yeah.
like
I don't know,
going
I
back
call
to-
women
it's-
dude.
It's like going
Yeah,
back to
we all
he or
do.
she.
Right. But
Which
it's although we all call women dude, and I call women dude, and hey buddy, hey man, when someone is
I don't.
trying to clarify their relationship with gender, and of course you can't say everyone is exactly the same, so one person might be upset by it, one person might not, but generally the preference would be like, don't use any gendered language towards me, even if normally you use it for both genders.
I'm afraid of your background.
Isn't this hilarious?
No.
This woman is a forever Trumper. I took a screenshot of her because she looked so insane.
Now here's an interesting
I like the mountains.
now here's an interesting situation of like when like I had a friend tell me a story about how she went to work and there was a new person who started at her job, and this person wanted to be referred to as they, them, but they didn't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, and apparently they were very like feminine, traditionally feminine looking, like heels, short dress, makeup, the whole nines. Like it was like
Put your
they
finger
were
on the button, Flav.
but like they were but my friend said like they were somebody who would be like, you know, that they were somebody who would be like, if you weren't informed otherwise, you would assume that they were a she, the same as like
So they were female appearing in.
They were female presenting, but wanted
female
to be
presenting.
called
Yeah.
they.
Well,
And
I think
then when somebody called them she, like they flew off the handle and got upset. And I feel like that, like the person who mistakenly called them she, should they have been demonized because they didn't exactly make it clear that they wanted to be called they?
So I have a question for you. Just a proposal. Do you think that in that case where you hadn't let other people know that yet, or know how you, what your preferred pronoun is, if you had introduced yourself as we, would that be like a new way to like introduce the idea that you then want to be referred to as they?
I don't think so, because we deals with
just
amount.
Well, I mean,
it's interesting to explore.
I'm trying to explore something new. Like, I understand what it means now, but you know,
I'm really curious.
I feel like it would be like a reciprocal thing. Like, I introduced myself as we, and then the other person knows to refer to me as they. Right? Like,
I think if someone did introduce themselves to me as we, I would probably try to stick with we, because that's what they gave me. But I would assume that they were a they in some ways. Yeah, I would assume that they were saying we because they were saying I'm non-gender conforming.
But I think that if you were to ask if they was acceptable, I don't think that that's a wrong thing to do.
Yeah, so what's becoming pretty normalized in the education community is when we meet new groups of students, we go around, we say names and pronouns. So that there's no ambiguity about it. We can just get it out in the open. So I'd say, hi, America, I'm a she, her, and then we go around the circle. And then you see it too in classrooms, Zoom classrooms. You'll see if someone's an educator, you can usually tell because often their name will be followed by she, her, or they, them.
You're an educator?
I teach, as you know, I do many things, but part of that is teaching. And yeah, we do pronouns now.
Good. You're going to be a panel member. I've been trying to put together this panel of teachers and educators from different areas and walks of life and different levels of education to have a conversation about the challenges, if any, of teaching marginalized people. I want to discuss things like how you tackle things like, Black History Month and, these are things that I want.
I work for a social circus. So we exist to serve low income communities, and predominantly those communities are communities of color. So we're dealing with several marginalized groups in our organization. So I do in-school residencies in low-income schools where most of the kids just receive free or reduced price lunches, and we do free after-school programs, and so All of the
Okay.
people I work with are marginalized.
So are you saying yes?
Well, I don't know what I'm saying yes to exactly.
Well, I just told you. I'm putting together a
Is this-
panel. Emily, who
Is this a
also
different
is a teacher.
podcast?
It's called On That Ish.
Ah, on the
Mike and I
yeah.
host it, and Emily is going to be a part of it. She's also a teacher, and I have a couple other teachers from different, levels of education and different, a couple people
And
teach.
teaching
Like,
different populations too.
yeah, like I have a teacher who teaches at an all girls private school. You know what I mean? In California. Just different, and it's interesting because, and there's a couple other things that I wanted to talk about too. Like, I don't know any outside of, Latinx people. I don't know any teachers that are like Black.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know any.
This conversation's come up on Facebook many times and in other groups many times. And if you challenge people to think about specifically a Black male teacher that they had, most people can't do it.
Yep.
Well, I can tell you exactly my first teacher that was Black, and it wasn't until college. So my freshman year of college, the first semester, my first class was ethnicity and race.
No.
And what's that?
I'm sorry.
And that I can pinpoint that was the first time I had a Black teacher. I definitely have had Black male teachers, but all of them were in college.
They
I didn't have it. What's that? Oh, hilarious. But yeah, yeah, you're right.
I mean, it's interesting because I don't think I had Black female teachers in college. I don't think I ever took a class from a Black male professor, but I know they were there. I just didn't take their classes. But every school that I've worked in on the other end as a teacher, I've worked with a Black male science teacher. Like every single school that I've been in, the person I worked the most closely with was in the science department was a Black male science teacher.
Yeah, I think education in general is predominantly like female based. You get a lot more female teachers than men in general, at least in the lower grades, the K through 12 level.
Sorry,
when you get to college, you're having what?
I had a coffee emergency. I spilled my coffee all over the floor.
Oh, was that what you were screaming about?
Yeah, because I have all these comic books around.
Oh.
And I knocked my coffee over.
Probably they're probably very rare comics.
Yeah, and I had to rush to get to this coffee before it spread to. That's why I was like, no.
Before it spread to the unplastic covered ones.
No, they're all covered in plastic, but I'm still very, you know what I mean?
Very, yeah. Yeah, no, trust me, I know what you mean. I've gotten like that if I think I'm about to spill coffee on like students'
School paperwork.
papers. So I get that.
Yep.
You're about to have another one of those conversations where it's like, characters who were originally written as white characters being like characters of color. There's about to be like a brown.
Am I?
Well, if you had,
if you'd spilled the coffee.
If you had spilled the coffee.
Yeah. Like, oh, I got black. I got black Superman.
Coffee colored Superman.
Erica.
Yeah.
I'm about to hit you with my one of my favorite questions to ask white people.
I love those questions.
Okay, cool. Have you ever been at any point in time in your life racist or prejudiced, or found yourself acting as such? Okay.
Every person on earth is racist. Everyone is racist.
I love when people tell me that these are the cool white people, the real ones, when they just keep it real. I did ask you and Cynthia, and both of you said yes.
Yeah, I
in
remember I was
Messenger.
there. I wrote it down.
Oh, well, I'm sure it's been saved for posterity. I just couldn't remember.
I did.
I think I might have I think I might have started singing from Avenue Q.
I would say that I'm
And
also
I will concede the same.
yeah.
I've been prejudiced, not racist, certainly prejudiced, and at least at a point in time in my life, very homophobic. Which I don't like the term homophobic because it speaks to fear, and I wasn't afraid of homosexuals. I certainly was. I had prejudice towards homosexuals for sure. When I was probably from like 16 through like 21, I didn't discriminate because it's just not in me to discriminate. But I would have the conversation that your lifestyle is wrong if given the opportunity. You understand what I'm saying? But I don't treat people. It's just not in me to treat people different. You know what I mean? Or treat them some type of way. Or I could be cool with you. Now I totally don't think that way. You understand what I'm saying? And
But
that
at
only
the time,
lasted
you
till I
felt
was
like
like
it was a
21.
choice.
But
Like,
at the time, from like 16 to 21, you know, those eras before I had left and saw the world, and you know what I mean, got to know people and know the world, and have a more open mind about things, and learn the truth about things rather than my own ideas. You know what I mean?
or
And
got to
those
know
were,
people outside of your own neighborhood.
oh yeah, for sure.
You know,
But
I
that's
would
something
say
that,
actually I can't pinpoint a blatant incidence where I was like, oh yeah, that was a racist thing I did. But I can say that I've often been biased against sex workers, and I learned later in life that that was a really classist behavior that I was engaging in, because I was a dance major in college, and the first time someone walked up to me and said, I'm a dancer, and oh cool, what kind of dance do you do? And they were like, I'm a dancer.
And here you are thinking that you were doing ballet or something.
Yeah, I was like, cool, I have a dance degree, let's talk about dance. And my mindset was, oh, we're not the same. I'm here and you're here. You are below me. And it took me a few years to realize that was a really fucked up way to approach life,
mm-hmm. I
Well,
understand. I've had a conversation with someone who I remember some years ago on Facebook. A friend of mine, she was a woman. She shared a video of this black woman who very pretty, very, very comely black woman who was in like fitness gear. And she had it on purpose. She was built a certain way. And this woman had this gear on purpose. And the whole purpose of her video was, and a friend of mine shared it to us. And the whole purpose of this video, the friend of mine was singing the praises of this video. And the whole purpose of the video was this woman the premise was she was going to twerk, right? And the whole time she doesn't twerk. The entire time she's building up to this whole I'm gonna twerk, but the video was really just it was kind of a trap, so to speak, to teach people, women in particular, you shouldn't be twerking, you shouldn't be out dancing, you should be respecting yourselves, da 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 da. This was her whole, and she was just like going in, but she kind of walks into it. You know what I mean? She crawls and then she walks and then she takes off running, so to speak. You know what I
I
mean?
hate to say to see what she thinks about WAP.
And so she just kind of went in and about how women should have more respect for themselves. And, my friend asked me what I thought about it. And I told her, I said, well, I think it's dumb. And she's like, well, what do you mean? This is telling women that you wouldn't want your daughter. And I'm like, listen, I work in an environment at the time where there's 90% women, and my perspective on what women, and first of all, I don't choose, nor do I have a right to choose what women can and cannot do. What a woman chooses to wear, what she chooses not to wear. Like, I don't have a right to say, like, this is not my right. I'm a dude. They don't have a right to, tell me any more than I do them. However, I just said to her, I said, it's interesting. A lot of women strip their way through college. They don't necessarily have another choice, or a lot of women and men too. You know what I mean? A lot of people may do things like you said with those type of dancers may do things, and this is what I was saying, they may do things not because you think they're disrespecting themselves, Maybe they appreciate themselves. Guys as well who are in that industry. Maybe they certainly appreciate themselves, and maybe there's reasons. Maybe they got a family at home, or they have kids, or they're working to pay their way through school, where they're you just kind of don't know. You know what I mean? You don't know. You just don't know.
I think
And it's
as a society, it's we've created this culture where we sexualize women on a ridiculous level, but
Yep.
it's unacceptable for women to feel empowered by their own sexuality, and that's where the
Preach.
shaming of sex workers comes in, and the shaming of twerking. It's like,
Preach.
so
Especially twerking. I'm sorry to cut you
Oh
off.
my
I just want
God.
to say, especially twerking, because I tell people, I said, listen, if you watch some of the dances that people accept or are considered classical, these things are okay. The tango is as sexual as it gets. But a girl twerks or does anything, some of it is resembling of African traditional stuff, and they're looked down upon. You understand what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm
I
sorry.
do
Go ahead.
understand what you're saying.
That's definitely
Yeah.
traditional African dances.
Yeah, when I see twerking or anything like twerking, and for me, I feel very, I've studied African dance for a long time, and I feel really passionate about the dances, the diaspora, and the art of the diaspora, and how as a culture we try to create and art of the diaspora is primitive art, or they'll put it in a gallery as Aboriginal art, and then this is fine art because this is the art that was done by white people. And when it comes to dance, shaming the movement and behavior of African culture is really what twerking, like hatred towards twerking, is in my eyes.
Preach.
That's definitely what it is.
So have you ever said the word nigger?
No,
Never in your life?
no, I can't even say it. No.
Not even when you were like a young kid, drinking
No.
some beers out at like the Hollywood sign?
I'm not from California. No, definitely not. Absolutely not.
Out in like Cass Creek.
Never accidentally singing along to a hip hop song. No, I've never said it.
Oh,
Absolutely not.
Emily, did you hear that? Never accidentally while singing a hip hop song. Did you hear that, Emily? Can you say that again for us one more time, Erica?
Who said it was an accident?
Oh, and then she victim blamed. Not only did she drop off a bunch of N-bombs on air, she then victim blamed. After dropping the N-bombs. I think it was revenge for us wanting to put the Mexican kids in baskets.
What goes around comes around.
Erica, we have a cancel button.
Oh no, you're not engaging in cancel culture, are you?
Oh yeah, Mike always has his finger on that button. Sometimes
He
people
canceled
need to
me
be
the other
canceled.
day.
Oh, did he? Mike, you canceled her?
I forgot. Did I cancel you?
You canceled me because I was trying to offer helpful feedback on what you could do about your chai tea situation.
About my what?
Your chai tea situation.
Oh, my chai tea. What did you tell me?
He hit you with a food rant.
No, yeah, so he had received some takeout and was excited to enjoy a cup of tea.
He's got 100 of these stories. It happens every time.
And he was going to enjoy something delicious, and it turned out not to be available to him because it wasn't vegan. And he was, understandably upset. And I was offering unhelpful
No, it's not understandable anymore.
Like, hey, what if you just made some chai tea right now in your kitchen? And, obviously unhelpful things.
We could do 5-minute shows on Mike's takeout issues. Like, we've been privy to his takeout issues like 100 times over.
Well, you weren't there for the one with me and Joey and Cynthia. We were actually talking about customer service people and like people being rude to customer service people. And then like we hear him on a hot mic, like saying, yeah, hi, I'm calling because I have a problem with my order. And Joey and Cynthia and I all just start dying laughing. We're like, I'm not going to mute him. This is relevant.
I was on the phone with him just the other day, and he's like, oh, man, they messed up my order. I had my mouth set for some delicious stuff. He's It's like I
That
didn't
might have
get
been
it.
this. That might have been the same. I can't remember.
Or what about the time you made the guy come back because he was leaving your food on the steps? It's just like, dude.
Oh, because he was leaving it in the hallway of the apartment.
It's like,
But
come
didn't you ask for no contact delivery?
No, it's they put it on the door. They put it on your doorstep, not in the hallway in the front of your apartment.
Then there was the fly
Take
in his
out
carriage.
issue earlier tonight.
What's that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I was trying to get contact list delivery from the Indian restaurant, and the guy came to the door. He had like a Grubhub bag, and there was a paper bag inside of it with my food. And I was watching him on the doorbell cam, and he was just like chilling at the front door. And I was like, "Hey, you can leave now." And he's like, "I can't leave. The bag ripped, so I don't know how to get your food out of my bag." So. So he made, I was like, all right, well, just leave it anyway. And he's like, I can't do it. I don't know how to, And so I was like, all right, so I have to take the food out myself, and so you can get your bag. So I opened the door, and he's like standing real close, and I was like, back up.
Social distance yourself.
Yeah, like my
Was it
filters
that
were,
bad?
like,
Was it that bad that he couldn't just take out the individual items and leave them?
he felt like it would be rude to leave the individual
Right.
items. I wanted him to. I was asking him to,
Right,
and he said,
right,
I
right.
can't do it. And I was like,
Right,
please,
right.
I don't want to open the door while you're standing there. Just do it. And he wouldn't do it. So that's why I was like, all right, you need to back up, because
I'm stuck on doorbell cam.
my life is bougie. What do you want from me?
That's what I'm stuck on. I think you're the first person I've ever heard to use the word doorbell cam in any conversation I've ever been in life. Like ever. Just like the doorbell cam, like it's just like, yeah, we all got doorbell cams, right? Like
We got a high-tech house. We have a very technologically advanced house.
So how does this doorbell cam work? When the doorbell rings, the camera comes on?
Yeah, so we have like a few hubs in the house, like screens. So when the doorbell rings,
Hubs.
the screen says someone's at the front door, and then until they leave, they are visible on all the screens in the house. Not like the TV and stuff, just like the little screens on the tables and stuff, so
She's
we can
got
see them out
enemy
there.
of the state going on in her house.
Oh yeah, you have no
I
idea.
mean, my apartment building
You're
has a
married to
camera
Brill.
on the buzzer. My apartment building has
Yeah,
a
the
camera on the
apartments.
buzzer.
Apartments have that.
Are you married to a guy named Brill?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No one told you.
He didn't tell you that his name is Brill.
Right.
And he works for the same guy, same place that they did on Enemy of the State.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
You've never
Wouldn't
seen
be
that
able to
movie?
speak to that.
Is that another one that's
No.
way after your time with Will Smith and
Who's Will Smith? He's old, right?
Will Smith? Yeah, he was, when Fresh Prince of Bel-Air came on, you probably were too old to to pay attention to
Yeah, that's the thing. He's a lot younger than me.
Will Smith. Yeah, Enemy of the State was a good film. You should check it out one
No,
day.
I think I have seen it. I have a tendency not to remember movies that I've only seen
Yeah,
once.
I like that too. You probably
I
watched
think
it a
most
long
people
time ago
don't.
too.
Most people
Yeah.
have seen Enemy of the State more than once, though.
Well, I'm not most
But
people.
still not enough to remember specific parts, right? I'm like that too. I don't have a good. I don't
Flav,
have,
you
think I
remember?
was
Flav, you remember Enemy of the State?
yeah, but I don't remember. If you like try to trot out some specific part, I'm not going to remember it. I remember Gene Hackman was in it, and I remember the beginning when
Jack
they're like
Black was in it.
they're running from the when they're running on the highways and all that shit. That's about it.
Jack
I remember
Black
that.
was in
I
it.
remember that long chase scene in the beginning.
Janet Jackson was in it.
I will start a movie that I'm convinced I've never seen before, and then 20 minutes in say, "Oh, I've seen this movie before."
Oh wow,
That's actually not bad. 20 minutes.
Well, I mean, you guys have a movie theater, so you probably cycle through movies You only have time to watch them once.
Oh,
Okay.
I wasn't allowed to see R-rated movies when it came out. Sorry.
Emily,
What
I
was
never
that,
asked you.
97? Was that 97?
98.
Have you ever used the word nigger before, Emily?
You know that she
We're
has
not
because she
we're not doing
I
this.
was gonna say,
No, you said nigga for sure.
You mean with the hard R?
Yes, in other
No.
areas or aspects of your life growing up
No.
at all for any reason.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I would not. I was raised very much in a household where that was not in the dialect in our house, and we were like, honestly, I would have got my ass kicked if I'd ever said that. So,
Really?
oh
That's
yeah,
I think that's interesting because I don't I kind of I'm kind of a cynic, right? So I don't think I was prepared to hear a white person say that had they used that word that they would have been punished by their parents.
oh, I would
I
have
think
been punished like more so than if, like much more so harshly, even than if I'd said fuck or shit in front of my parents.
Mm,
there are a lot of white households where racism is discouraged.
mm. See, I'm on the outside looking in. You know what I mean? So, and I was born in the '70s. So, while I definitely don't think that all white people are racist, or even a majority, I'll be honest and say like I don't. I also think that, and again, I don't want to put this on just white people because I think this is cultural. Different cultures are guilty of the same thing. You know, one of the things that I was telling somebody recently is that I am very sensitive. This is empathy, right? You know, I can't we had this conversation on the show where I felt like certainly black people have some responsibility in educating white people who genuinely want to understand, you know, their plight. You know, we can't just say, "Oh, go do the work yourself." I mean, I think that's kind of like passing the buck. I think we have a part of that responsibility. I think intention matters. And in reflecting on that, I concluded that I don't expect, like, I can't go learn about the plight of every marginalized group, you know, but I can empathize, right? I can, you know, when things are explained to me, I can, even if I don't necessarily understand it, I can accept it. I can say, okay, I understand that you feel that way. I get it. You understand what I'm saying? I probably can't feel the way that you feel, but I understand you do feel this way. You understand what I'm saying? And I accept that. And, you know, and so, you know, growing up, right, I think, and just in thinking about that, I think that sometimes we all can suffer from not being empathetic, and not purposefully, but because we're in situations sometimes where we just don't even have to think about it. You understand what I'm saying? Like, we're just not exposed to a thing, so we just don't even have to consider that this group of people over here may be going through this or feel this way because they're so far removed from us. So in some cases, we might find ourselves inadvertently acting in such a way that if we realize this is what we're doing, we would probably be like, hold on, wait a minute. That's kind of like how you know, looked at the dancers a certain way. You understand what I'm saying? And it probably wasn't because inherently you're just a shady person who looks down on other women. You understand what I'm saying? It was probably because it never even occurred to you until you were confronted with this woman who danced in a different manner than you did. You never really had to consider what it is that you eventually, you know, came to conclude. So I think when I look at white people, I tend to think, because I talk to white people who are very close with me, and they say, well, like you said, you know, you said you think that all white people on some level are racist. And many of my friends who are my allies say the same thing. And they're like, Ish, I'm not going to let you give white people a pass. They're all of us. You know, I'm speaking of someone who's white. I'm hearing her say it to me right now. And she's like, you know, all of us. And she goes, and sometimes it's inadvertent, meaning we don't even know when because of systemic things in our country and the way our society is geared and the way we just kind of look at things. You know what I mean? We don't even recognize when we are possibly being insensitive or non-empathetic. So again, to make a long story short now, to bring it home, when I think of just the typical white nuclear family, it just didn't really occur to me that, and I guess there is, because I know people like that. So I'm sure I know people that if their child came home and said the N-word, they're going to get their butt tore up. You know what I mean? Like their parents are not having that. But it just never occurred to me. Like I've never heard anyone ever say ish if I would have said that in my household, especially because most of my friends are contemporary with me. So then they came from a generation where like we were born in the 70s. So their parents, these things were, if it wasn't the norm for their parents, it was the norm for friends of their parents. You know, they're 10 years removed from civil rights. As you know, I was born in 75, so I'm less than 10 years removed from the civil rights movement. So my friends who are contemporary with me that are white, their parents either were racist or certainly grew up in a society where it was okay to be racist. You see what I'm saying? So that kind of influences my thought process. So it's just literally, Emily is probably the first person I've ever heard actually say, I would have been punished if I used the N-word.
I mean, like, it's interesting because I know it's like the running gag that I'm the baby, but I think like being like, there is like something to be said maybe for like the difference between being born in the 70s versus being born in the 80s. That like by the time that I was born, it was further removed from the civil rights movement. But what I will say is like, you know, my childhood growing up, like I was, honest to God, I can't even remember the first time I met a black person because it was probably when I was like a newborn. Like our circles were always, like my parents always kept very integrated circles of friends. Or like, for example, like, I mean, my dad was a college professor. They'd hire their students to come down and babysit, like, of any, like, and they didn't give a rat's behind, like, what race they were. Like, I had Asian babysitters, black babysitters, white babysitters, probably Hispanic babysitters, although I can't remember. Like, it was like, I was never around anybody who ever would have dared to say that word. Like, I don't think I ever even heard that word possibly until I was like 10 or 11, to be honest with you. And by then it was already like pretty ingrained in me that like, you don't do that. Like, you don't be racist because to me, like, it wasn't like, you know, oh, there's a black person. It was like, oh, well, there's Joe or John or whatever the hell their name was. You know what I mean?
See, I grew up in a family, with the exception of my mother, that was very prejudiced. And when I say the exception of my mother was the youngest of 8. And all of them were born and raised in Tupelo, Mississippi. And my mother was born in 1952. My father was a radical Muslim, you know, an activist, the whole nine.
He was a
So
Farrakhan Muslim, wasn't he? Like, you've mentioned this before.
I don't know if he was, he left the nation because he doesn't agree with Farrakhan. He's still a Muslim.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But he was very radical, very militant, very active, you know, and like I never heard my grandfather call a white person a white person. He always called them Peckerwood. Every time. Like I never heard him not say, when referring to white people, anything other than what I just said. Sorry I'm not trying to be offensive. That's what he never heard, anything other than that. You know, all of his children, with the exception of my mother, because my mother was, you know, born in 1952 in Tupelo, but raised here in the North. She was raised in New York. So my mother had a different perspective, but every one of her brothers and sisters, and some to this day, harbor a deep, they don't trust white people. Again,
I don't blame them, honestly.
Tupelo, Mississippi, pre-1950s.
I think the big difference between, right, you came from a household where everyone was prejudiced against white people. That's a little bit more justified than the behavior of a white household where the prejudice against black people. So I went to school in Kingston, Jamaica for a little bit and everywhere I went, it's not a very diverse city. You know, a lot of people I encountered there had never met or seen a white person before. And so people felt the need to shout everything they ever felt about white people at me as I was walking down the street. And I wasn't like, dude, fuck you. I wasn't involved in that shit. I was like, yeah, I get it. You know, like, it's justified. If you're, particularly in Jamaica, if you're in a nation that was built on slavery and built on white people, you know, stealing human beings, and that's the foundation of your nation, like, yeah, of course, it's not okay to be prejudiced and not be open-minded and learn about people as an individual, but it is totally understandable to behave in that way versus a white person behaving that way. It's just like, all right, dude, get your shit together, you know?
It's interesting you say justified.
Yeah, I always say to Ish, I never agree with the whole painting both sides as like equal and opposites. I always feel the need to justify that the black experience that feels that way is totally different than the white experience that feels that way.
I when you say you never agree with me, my argument is never that they're equal and opposite.
I didn't say agree with you. I never said that.
No. Well, you did say I never agree with Ish that the whole hating both sides is equal and opposite. That's actually what you said.